This is Governor Bob Ehrlich. Good day, doctors.
George Allen here. Good day, doctors.
Go!
You're watching Dr. Politics.
They're Dr. Politics. He's the one to see. Breaking down the news with sharp analysis. From Congress halls to campaign trails, he tells the truth when all else fails. They're Dr. Politics. Dr. Politics. Exposing the spin, the lies and tricks. Dr. Politics. Dr. Politics. He calls it straight, no politics as usual. Love from backroom deals to primetime fights. He sheds some light and sets things right. Debates, elections, policy. He cuts through all the DC sleaze. Dr. Politics, he's got the facts. Dr. Politics, no holding back. Dr. Politics, go away. Dr. Politics, he's got the facts. Dr. Politics, no holding back. Dr. Politics.
All right, everyone. Good evening. This is Friday, June 27th, and we don't have Dwight with us tonight. He is busy doing some Republican politicking, I guess. So he's busy doing what he should be doing as a member of the Maryland Republican Central Committee. What is he, first vice chair or something? I lose track of all of this stuff over time. But anyway, so Dwight's doing his politicking duty. So I'm Don Irvine, and joined by David Shepard. You know, we're the other doctors as such.
That's right.
This is the only time we ever get to call ourselves doctor, right?
Yeah, that's right. I'm not a doctor, but I play one on a podcast.
That's right. And we're apologize for being late. We had a couple of technical snafus we were trying to figure out. Without Dwight the guru, who's just basically put this on autopilot, we're like, oh, well, you know, what does that look like? So anyway, we're glad to be with you, and we will just get right into it. We've had a lot of news in the last week since we last met, but you know, Dave, let's go ahead and start with the SCOTUS decision today. I didn't realize, to be honest, until earlier today that I guess these were going to be just about the last decisions, I guess, of the term, right? The term normally ends on June 30th, which is Monday. But I guess this is it. They're calling it quits now. They do this. They won't reconvene till the first Monday in October. There'll be some activity during the summer about some other things to set up for the fall. But other than that, you know, we've been waiting on some cases, and we got a couple of decisions today that were victories for Trump. You know, what are your thoughts?
Well, first off, congrats to Montgomery County, Maryland.
Woohoo!
You guys, yeah, I wasn't surprised by that, but yeah, that's just part of their indoctrination, and they try to cut out the parents as much as possible. And so it's good that the court stood up, certainly for religious liberty, but also against the sort of craziness, the woke craziness in the schools. But it shows how brazen, Maryland, I guess, or the people that run the schools there are. They thought they could get away with it. But I was very happy to see that. And then, of course, clipping the wings on these district judges in terms of these national injunctions, I think is high time for that. The other thing I've noticed is that Jackson and Justice Jackson and Coney Barrett got into it, and you don't usually hear that. Usually, there may be some references to a judge or a disagreement, but in this case, I thought Coney Barrett responded pretty sharply. So that was good to Jackson's view that the imperial presidency, but Coney Barrett's view as well. Yeah, but with these injunctions, then you've got these district courts which are acting like imperial powers, basically unelected, and blocking the elected president. So overall, I was very happy. I thought it was good news.
Yeah, and just as Susan said there, and as you said too at the beginning here, this is a victory for Montgomery County citizens. Now,
Yeah.
I live in a very liberal county, right, where about 75% of the registrants are Democrats. In that somewhere in that ballpark, and they're pretty much all liberals for the most part. But when it comes to issues like this, a lot of times, even those that vote Democrat have a little bit of a problem with some of these types of issues. Particularly, particularly like the Hispanic community and things like that, who are big on families and things like that. They're a lot of Catholic households within that community. They struggle with with this issue in terms of to square the public school stance versus their own personal religious belief and their stance. And so this is big. Yeah, but the fact that the county, had thought that they could actually, they had a chance in the Supreme Court, that they took it that far, that they wanted to fight this, is just showing how arrogant they are here in this county. I've lived here all my life. I've seen lots of ups and downs. Conservatives have had a few bursts of victory here and there, in the school system. Very rare, but they've had a few. And just to see that this, happen. Yes, look, the parents to not allow the parents to opt out of, this LGBTQ curriculum in the schools, to say no, your child must be a part of this.
Yeah.
Absurd. This is absolutely absurd. We didn't have, when my kids were younger and growing up, it wasn't anywhere near this bad. I mean, I am appalled, at what has happened to this county and to the schools, and I don't know how this compares to, Virginia, because you grew up in Virginia, and I don't know whether or not you've seen the same sort of deterioration where we've gone kind of, though there was a big, obviously, kind of a critical race theory and all kinds of things that kind of really erupted in Virginia a few years ago, and probably helped Glenn Youngkin win the governor's race. But I look at my childhood, which was relatively tame. We didn't have a lot of these politics, and then I get to we jump all the way to when my children are going through, and there's things that you didn't necessarily like. I mean, it's where my kids, when they would do like these mock elections, like who would you vote for president? And my kids were voting Republican, and they'd be almost the only ones. And stuff like that. Or when we had what was that education? What was that thing that Phyllis Schlafly was fighting years ago with in education?
Common Core?
It wasn't. Yeah, it was not common. It was something like that. But I mean, and she had a whole
life education.
Yeah, I think that's what. So she had a whole program to counteract that, right? Yeah, right. And we were seeing some of that. But for example, I mean, when it comes to see how far they've come, I mean, we had. I remember when my youngest son was in Montgomery County School, and there was an option. There was a sex ed, class, and my wife said no, and so you could opt out, and then you'd have a different course of study, in order, but he had to complete something, some unit or whatever, while the other kids were getting the sex ed propaganda, and I won't forget it, mainly because he had a really good friend of his who was, who we knew the parents. They shared the same faith system as we did.
Yeah.
But they didn't opt out. And his friend said, "I wish I didn't have to take this, this course, because I guess he called it icky or whatever. He wasn't ready for it. In elementary school, he wasn't ready for it. I got that. I got sex ed when I was what, like 14 or 15. It was when I was in middle school. Okay.
Yeah.
Teenager. But the preteen stuff, I mean,
Yeah.
and this, I mean, look, that son of mine is now 33 years old. But you can see how things were changing then. But
Oh,
now
yeah.
to say there is no opt out,
Yeah.
give me a break. It
And
doesn't make any sense at all.
plus, you got to realize when we were coming up, what they were teaching us was extremely tame compared to today. I mean, we didn't deal with any of the gender stuff, none of that. And even homosexuality, that was never really discussed. All I remember from sex ed is just sort of more of the biological sort of discussion. And they separate the boys and the girls, and then you could anonymously write a question. And as I recall, it was like the gym coach teaching. That's all it was. It's not like today. Some of the books that they mentioned, we wouldn't have had any of those types of books in my library. But that was part of this course that the Supreme Court shot down with Montgomery County. Is it was also they were teaching to these books, which were basically propaganda, basically had an ideology behind them. And I could tell by the title of the books that they mentioned. So I could tell what this is about. And so, no, I'm glad for religious freedom and parental choice. And in Virginia, it's probably about just as bad as Maryland. I mean, you would have thought, well, Virginia will be a little less bad. Certainly not really, and not in Northern Virginia, I think. And Loudoun County is a basket case. But I'm glad that the court stood up there. And it also should remind all of us how important it was that Donald Trump got elected president in 2016, because we got elected president in 2016 and he got 3 picks. Had he not, and Hillary had won, it would be so different today. You'd have a solid liberal majority today. So thankfully we've got Trump, and that should remind us of that. Oh.
All right, I got a message.
I think that's fine.
Yeah, I don't know. There's some message about Facebook. I don't know if anybody's trying to watch us on Facebook or not, but yeah.
But anyway, so that's what's one of the great legacies, and that's one of the things that we can, I don't know about count on, but we have to realize that every year around this time, we have that sort of good news coming out, because the Supreme Court will start making their decisions, and usually it's going to go our way. It doesn't always have to, but I think we've got a majority there. And I was pleasantly surprised to see that Coney Barrett was with us. So Coney Barrett's the swing one, and she was with us on these, so that's good.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, that's the thing. I mean, and as Susan said, I mean, I think it was 7th grade. I wasn't sure if it was 7th or 8th grade, but I think she's right. And I think, yeah, I guess I thought it was a health class, and there was a health teacher. But sometimes, yeah, gym teachers and other people like that are often thrown in to teach various courses, right?
I didn't mean to put them down. I think they did a fine job, but it was just a regular teacher. In other words, I mean,
right.
And that's all you'd need. You wouldn't need a doctor, I think, to.
Yeah, it's like not the mechanics.
Yeah, I think she's right. That's about what it was. And then it just talked about, conception or how babies, just basic sort of stuff. So that was fine.
Yeah. So it's, if you didn't have the birds and the bees discussion with your parents beforehand, you got a pretty good idea after that. But yeah, no, I mean, you can look at where we are today. I mean, the books and everything like that, the left has been able to succeed a lot of talk about, this is free speech issue, and you can't you can't do this and you can't do that, and you have book banning and all these kinds of other things. But it's out propaganda what they're trying to do, and shove all this stuff down the kids' throats.
And the other thing is, we sort of everyone sort of accept this idea that, well, government or the school has a role in this area. And I'm not so sure about that. I don't know that government really does have any business here, but that's the way it is. And, all schools have the sex ed program. Again, I question whether it's even needed the schools to do it. I think if they got other things, they should probably prioritize, but be that as it may, it's one thing to teach, the basic biological facts of things. It's another if you're starting to get into gender. You could change your gender. You might be happier. None of that they should be involved in. That should have nothing to do with them.
Well, it's not, to me. It's not like it's not like pregnancy rates and things like that have really been shown to plummet as a result of sex ed classes in the schools, right? And just,
Yeah,
if they were trying to teach, in essence, some mechanics, and make sure that people, if they were going to have sex, it was going to be safe sex or whatever. They certainly didn't do that, at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, social engineering, not biology. I mean,
Yeah.
there is an agenda that goes on here by the liberals, by the left, when it comes to this, and that's that's all part of Montgomery County. Montgomery County I think they just feel very emboldened that they can kind of run roughshod over the conservatives here, because there aren't a whole lot of us. But so conservatives in Montgomery County, make some more noise and use this as a springboard to do more. I mean, Republicans and conservatives in Montgomery County should take heart in this, that this is a big deal for them, and maybe they can use this in other ways to their advantage. It's where it's a tough fight, but it's something that we haven't seen, where Montgomery County's been put on the stage, and we actually wind up on the winning side. And you're correct, on the Trump, 2016 election, that as even though for all those never Trumpers and no Trumpers and whatever, the fact remains is that one of his greatest legacies of his first administration were his Supreme Court nominations.
Absolutely.
And how he solidified that, because those are picks that will last 20, 30, 40 years, depending upon the life of the justice, and have a vast influence. And we have seen huge, big decisions, mostly going in favor of conservatives, since he got those people on there. Not all the time. I mean, you have people who you can't always count on it being 6-3, right? Sometimes it goes 5-4, and sometimes it flips against you a little bit. Is Amy Coney Barrett a guaranteed lock on the conservative side? Not necessarily, but I think that also shows that she's not subject to a lot of politics. And I think any pressure from the president, I think the Supreme Court has really tried to resist that pressure from the president and say, we need to follow the law and the Constitution of what we see, and do that. And I think that's why this leads it. On the other decision, as you said, clipping the wings of these judges around the country on these rulings, this has always been kind of one of those things that has puzzled me, I guess, to a certain extent, is how you basically are going judge shopping or court shopping. You're looking for areas where you can take a decision, look for a favorable decision to stop something you don't want. And maybe this hopefully puts an end to a lot of that. Whether or not it ends birthright citizenship, that's not really what I think that wound up happening here. But it does give the president a chance to exercise more power without having to have all these federal judges intervene and block, say we're going to issue these injunctions. So that'll be interesting. I don't know about you. I mean, birthright citizenship, I mean, I have no problem if you're born in this country, you're an American citizen. But for those that actually that come over here illegally with express purpose of having a child, so that that child can become an American citizen, and then start a whole different process. That's not right.
No, I don't think that was ever meant in the Constitution. And in the case of The famous 1898 case they talk about, Woo Kim Oak or Woo Oak Kim. I'm sorry, I keep forgetting the name. His parents were ruled as permanently domiciled in the United States. So they really weren't illegal aliens. They weren't here on a student visa. They weren't here, none of that. And anyway, he tried to come back into the country and they said he wasn't a citizen. That's what the case was about. But they ruled that he was born here. And again, in the decision, it mentioned that his parents were, no, they didn't use the terms we use today, but they did say the parents were permanently domiciled in the United States. In other words, they weren't foreign nationals. The difference is if you're saying, well, someone's a citizen of another country, they come into our country and give birth. Constitutionally, I don't think that makes the child a citizen, and I don't think that Supreme Court case is going to back up that baby would be a citizen. So, but I'm in the minority probably on that view, and most of the analysts say that the court will not go along with Trump's view or my view. So we'll see. I don't know, but I support Trump trying and trying to make a case. Obviously, the 14th Amendment Citizenship Clause deals with the fact that a slave is not a citizen of any country. And when we freed the slaves, well, they had to do something to make sure that they could become citizens, in part because you had the Dred Scott decision, which Dred Scott said a slave could never be a citizen, a freed slave, even if they're freed. So that's why they had to amend the Constitution to protect the slaves, just in case the freed slaves. And the point was that the slaves, their parents weren't citizens, but they were born here, so that's why they are citizens. They became citizens by birth. But I tend to agree with Trump. That wouldn't be the same thing if someone is from a foreign country, they come into our country, then give birth. Well, the parent is subject to the laws of another jurisdiction. In other words, they're from another country, and therefore the child will not be an American citizen, in my opinion. We'll see if the court rules that.
Yeah, I would probably would say that I'm going to find it highly unlikely, at least at this point, that the court will do that, as you were saying. But I think what Trump is trying to do is I mean, does this happen in any other country? I mean, I'm unaware of anything. Somebody please, pipe in if you've got that. But there
are only a few countries, I think, that have birthright citizenship, and the claim is the United States is one of them. But the thing about the 1898 case is that there are exceptions that they even said. Apparently, if you're part of an invading army, you give birth in the United States, the child isn't a U.S. citizen, the court's ruled. And secondly, if you work for a foreign embassy or a foreign government and are born here, you're not a citizen. So those are the two exceptions that we have now. I think Trump is trying to tighten it even further to say that if you're here illegally, you wouldn't be a citizen. The question is, would the court would the court go along to some degree? In other words, maybe the parent would have to have some sort of standing. I don't know. The other thing is the idea that subject to the laws thereof, these words that was put into it, is kind of maddening for a lot of people. And the thing is, if you're here illegally, you're not subject to the laws thereof. You're trying to get around the laws. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. It seems to me kind of an obvious case that the kid wouldn't be an American citizen. But again, we'll see. I remember my first ex was born in Berlin or Hamburg, Germany, because her father worked for the U.S. Government. Obviously, she's not a German citizen. She's an American citizen no matter where she's born. And I always interpreted it depends on your parents. So you can be born in Okinawa. You could be born wherever. But for me, it was always, well, it depends on your parents. And so I've always looked at it that way. Because and it's sort of fraud to the highest extent for someone to break our laws just to give birth here. And the other thing is, if you believe in this birthright citizenship, then think about it. That means every woman in the world of childbearing age could confer U.S. citizenship on her child, even though she's not an American citizen. As long as she makes it here, then it would be her choice as to what to confer American citizenship to a child. I think that's insane. And it's almost like Justice Jackson, not this Justice Jackson, but Robert Jackson said, the Constitution's not a suicide pact, and I tend to agree with him. And we shouldn't allow people to use it against us like that. But
Yeah,
anyway.
no, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, I think that the idea that anybody can basically come here and have a child and they become an American citizen is absurd. That they're coming. You can, whether or not it's Mexico, Guatemala, Great Britain, Japan, or whatever. It doesn't matter to me. I mean, that just shouldn't be happening, and it definitely shouldn't be happening if they didn't come through the country legally. If they did not enter the port, come through a port of entry legally and actually have, you were talking about having standing, or at least being recognized as someone who's here. They've got a green card or whatever. They're working towards citizenship. If you're working towards citizenship, when you're going through that process, okay, I mean, you have a desire to come to this country and follow our laws, and you want to become a citizen of our country and do that. But illegals, they've come through in a different process, and they often skirt the system. We've seen with all these ICE raids and all these things that there are people who are illegal and they don't go to work now, or certain things like that. They're afraid, but that's because they understand they broke the law to get here. So they're in a very treacherous situation under the Trump administration. And I mean, I don't really have a lot of sympathy for that. It's like, I had, I mean, at AIM, we had a guy who, he came from the Ukraine, and this was, it's probably been 15, geez, I don't know how many years, 20 years, whatever it's been. And he paid tens of thousands of dollars to attorneys, to follow the procedure. And it was slow. I mean, you've read the stories. This guy is an example of that, of where you pay lawyers tens of thousands of dollars, and it takes you years. It can take you a decade or more to get your name to the top of the list before the government finally says, okay, we're going to now review your application and then maybe actually approve your application, and you get a green card, and then you're on your way. And he didn't disparage the illegal aliens that were coming at the time, but you could tell in talking with him that he just, here was a guy who was basically was a law-abiding, citizen otherwise. I mean, he was trying to follow the rules of how to become a citizen, and then all he had to do is watch the news and just read about 11 million, 15 million people in this country that just ran across the border and are having jobs and doing things like this, and they're not spending tens of thousands of dollars to become citizens. They have a kid, that kid becomes a citizen, and then creates, a potential path for them to get citizenship. All these kinds of things.
Yeah, it's all sort of a scam, and it's done by purpose to get the kids, the anchor baby, to pull everyone over. That's why we got to get rid of chain migration. But it's interesting because I wrote a column about this. The biggest change I can think of, one of the biggest changes politically in my lifetime, or at least sort of recently in my adulthood, it's got to be over the issue of immigration. And you remember after Romney lost, the Republicans got together to think. They did an autopsy. What do we have to do to going forward? And the belief was that they needed to soften their hardline immigration stance, push for a comprehensive immigration deal, which is an amnesty. And this was the thinking. And remember, you had Jeb Bush, the front runner, talk about an act of love and coming across the border. Well, Trump said, no, I don't buy that at all. We can appeal to non-American people born in other countries that are citizens by issues, whether it's economics, foreign policy, and such, and that this amnesty stuff doesn't help us politically. And Trump stuck to his guns. And do you know, the shift in the Republican Party is now clear, but not only that, in the country, Democrats years ago kept talking about amnesty. We need, amnesty and immigration reform stuff. They don't even really talk about that anymore. They don't even do it. So that really has changed greatly. That's the one issue I think, if you look over the last 10, 15 years, has really changed greatly. It's immigration. And I mean, even people here who weren't born here, they're not in favor of amnesty, nor are they in favor of even more legal immigration. Even that's not all that popular. So that's changed a lot. That's one of the big differences. And I think in part, give Joe Biden credit for it because he was so bad with the open borders. It just upset so many people. And the backlash is even on legal immigration because we've always been very pro legal immigration, but even there's some more resistance in terms of increasing that. So and I'll clean this up. As Barack Obama once said, never underestimate Joe's ability to F it up. And he F'd that up for the Democrats. So the guy is a disaster. So, but we'll see what the court rules on the birthright citizenship. I tend to be pessimistic from my standpoint. I don't think they're going to do much with that. So I don't think we're going to get rid of that, even though, as I've said, constitutionally, I don't think there's any such thing, but we'll see. We'll see what happens there.
Let me just say my final comment on immigration to those is that I don't know that it would have been necessarily as big an issue, without Trump, jumping on it. But I think that what Governor Abbott did in particular, by busing and sending the illegal immigrants to other cities, particularly to the blue states, blue cities, was while it was expensive as heck, the measures that he took, was extremely effective because it basically took the immigration problem that liberal mayors and others had ignored and put it on their doorstep and say, we are dealing with this. So, if we're dealing with this, I mean, this show how would you handle this? How do you handle it? You basically have been turning the other cheek and ignoring that this isn't even an issue. So here's 125 immigrants, that we're going to send you every week or whatever. Now and which is we're just sending you a fraction of the number of people that are pouring across our borders. How do you like that? What are you going to do about it? I mean, and look what Mayor Adams did in New York. I mean, he became kind of a staunch advocate. He's like, this is costing us too much money. It's it's too much of a problem. We got to do something. It did have an effect, I think, on a lot of liberal cities. Is like, we've got this is untenable for us. And woke them up. And I don't think a lot of people understood that even illegal immigrant, even before some of the people were shipped there, that illegal immigrants, were making their way up into other states. They didn't just stay in Texas or Arizona. They were going, they started heading up. They headed up towards Colorado. They headed up, and somewhere they headed into the South and stuff like that, wherever they could find a spot to land and hopefully, basically stay under the radar of the authorities. So it's, this was an interesting situation.
Yeah, and the thing is, I've heard about hospitals being in big trouble during this surge because they go to the hospitals and the hospitals are going to take care of people, which that's their job. But it's just a great cost. You got someone without insurance coming in and you take care of them. So they're losing a lot of money. And just the basic common sense of letting in 10, 15 million poor people, that can't be good. I mean, it's got to cost a lot of money in terms of social services. Where are they going to live? I mean, it was just insanity. I mean, as I said earlier, I quoted Justice Robert Jackson, the Constitution is not a suicide pact, but I mean, it's like a suicidal policy to just be letting, I think that at one time in our country's history, maybe it was fine. We needed unskilled labor. You needed massive bodies, but that's not the case anymore. It really isn't. You don't just need to bring in millions of poor people and millions of bodies. It just isn't necessary in this economy anymore. So, but anyway, the final thought, I guess, on that is that Trump made a huge change. Trump changed the thinking to a large extent. And Joe Biden helped change the thinking of the American people on this one and altered policy. So that I think is pretty dramatic difference for me.
Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, so that's been a big issue. So the Supreme Court, a couple of big cases decided today. Good, good wins for the president. Liberals are just having a real conniption fit, and elections have consequences,
Yep.
and we see it here. But I think you and I are both pretty happy.
Yeah, no, it's good. We got a good court, and to some degree, maybe you have to give Mitch McConnell credit, because remember, he kept that one seat open and kept Merrick Garland off, so all that got Trump another pick.
Yeah. And look, I want to say, in Mitch McConnell, here's a Republican who has had a remarkable career.
Yeah.
And Republican conservatives have jumped all over him over the years.
Yeah.
They have a love-hate relationship with Mitch.
Yeah.
And I understand that. But I mean, to me, the bottom line is that Mitch was a very effective leader for the Republicans. He pretty much kept that coalition together as much as possible. I mean, I don't know that he could have done much with Murkowski, Collins, and Romney, or even a John McCain. I mean, they were going to be who they were going to be, but he held together pretty good. And yes, keeping Merrick Garland off the court, maneuvering, he was very good at doing that. He was great at counting votes. I mean, I think he deserves a lot more credit than a lot of conservatives are willing to give him. And I think the vilification by conservatives of Mitch is just is wrong. I mean, we wouldn't have the court in a lot of ways that we have today if Mitch hadn't stopped that.
I agree. Yeah, I agree.
So anyway, let's go ahead and move on, because I know you had written a column about this. I'm pretty sure you wrote a column about this, right? On the New York Socialist.
Yeah, that's right. Mamdani.
Yeah, so this guy Zoran Mamdani, he won the primary, the Democratic primary in New York for the mayor. He beat Andrew Cuomo. Now there's a lot of crazy things that go on in this primary, because one is that the incumbent mayor, who's a Democrat, is running as an independent. Okay, so he came under some judicial scrutiny and legal scrutiny. Trump is they came in to defend him, and and Eric Adams has been he's a former cop. He's been trying to be strong on crime. I mentioned how he kind of fought back against some of this immigration nonsense that was going on. So the left had soured on him, but they definitely coalesced. The left coalesced around Mamdani, and the thing is that in ranked choice voting, which I think is just a farce, they really set this up, because I read one of the things too is that they put together a campaign where they're even selling $35 T-shirts of like, "Don't rank Cuomo." So you have to vote, but you also rank in preference the other candidates, so that if no one gets 50% of the vote, they then reapportion the lower votes to their preference, and they continue to do that until they get to the 50% level, and then that person now is the winner. Now there won't be ranked choice voting for the general election. So now you have what I think is an absolutely crazy race. Is you've got the socialist, you've got the independent, the incumbent mayor, you've got Curtis Sliwa, Guardian Angel fame, and it looks like you've got Cuomo running on some independent party thing, that he's going to do that. So you've got four people running for governor. Mayor. For mayor. I don't know who's going to win this. I mean, I assume it's, I don't know. I mean, I would think that Adams is going to do fairly well. I don't know how much support, Mamdani gets, because it's just, I think there are a lot of people in New York that, when it comes down to it, I don't really think they want a socialist. Yeah. They want to keep it in Democrat hands. But Cuomo is not exactly the most popular guy in the room either. I mean, they've elected lefties before. I mean, De Blasio, Bloomberg, all these kind of people. They have a long history of doing that. But socialist, and what his programs are? You want to
Well,
talk? You want to talk about what he stands for?
yeah. Well, the other thing about it is so few people really sort of voted in that primary because you got 8 million people, and I think it was like a million or so voted. So I don't know. Maybe Mamdani can lose, but I think he's definitely going to be the front runner. And then if you had Cuomo and Adams, I don't know if they split the vote. So I don't know. I think that Mamdani would have that core there with him, but more will come out about him, and maybe as New York faces the abyss, they decide to turn back because this guy's radical. I mean, this guy's talking about trying to arrest Netanyahu. If Netanyahu comes, he's talking about having the city run grocery stores. So I guess to work at the grocery store, you go take a civil service test. I mean, this is just insanity. And you would think that New York's not that crazy. I mean, what would be that crazy? I said on my podcast earlier that if Vladimir Lenin came up from hell, there's no way he could get to Hamdani's left. How's he going to get to his left? He can't do it. So we'll see. But it's sad, though. I mean, New York was once a great city. You had some tough periods when you had David Dinkins, and then Giuliani came and cleaned things up. And Bloomberg, to his credit, was a moderate sort of mayor and did a good job. Things started going poorly with DeCamio, when Blasio was bad. But it continues to drift further to the left. And I said earlier that I think Schumer's got to be nervous because they went after Cuomo. I think the left in New York can get rid of Schumer. I think Schumer would have trouble. I don't know that he could beat AOC, and I don't know if AOC is going to run, but maybe they could find another sort of lefty to run against Schumer. So Schumer could be in a tough spot after this.
Yeah, this reminds me too. Let me just look this up real quick.
Oh, yeah. Chuck Schumer. Not that I'm feeling sorry for Chuck Schumer. I'm not, but we'll see.
I'm trying to. So I don't know if you get or read the Wall Street Journal. So this is what they had to say on this election. Democratic establishment is upset about socialist Zoran Mamdani's victory in this week's New York Democratic mayoral primary, but he couldn't have done it without the establishment's help. To wit, the failure of big city Democratic governance, and they point to sky-high rents. Governor Andrew Cuomo signed a law that restricted landlords' ability to raise rents to pay for renovations and deregulate rent-stabilized units, which account for more than 40% of the city's rental housing. Landlords responded by removing tens of thousands of units from the market.
Yeah.
Cuomo imposed long COVID eviction moratorium, which applied to commercial property. This caused landlords to raise rents to compensate for non-paying tenants. Property taxes have risen to feed the public union machine. Cuomo's 2011 property tax cap exempted New York City. Cuomo campaigned in 2010 for governor, letting state millionaires tax expire, only to repeatedly extend it. In spring 2021, he raised the city's top income tax rate to 14.8% from 12.7%, and the business franchise tax from 7.25% to from 6.5%. Even as the government coffers were awash in COVID cash. His COVID lockdowns and tax hikes fueled the flight of high earners and businesses. New York City population declined by some 320,000 between 2020 and 2024, despite an influx of foreign migrants. He banned fracking upstate, vetoed 3 pipelines. Predictable result. Electricity and natural gas shortfalls pushed up electricity prices. Electric bills in the city increased on average by 37%. Gas prices by 29% between 2020 and 2024. Businesses just, they passed their cost on. Minimum wage. Cuomo boosted the city's minimum wage at 15 from 9. It's now $16.50. That higher minimum wage has slammed hospitality and retail businesses that employ less skilled workers. Shoplifting has increased to Cuomo's signing of the cash elimination of cash bail. The bail laws led to more fare evasion and crime on public transit. Fewer people taking the subway because of safety risks. Subway and bus fare revenue is $900 million lower than it was in 2019, while labor costs have increased by $2 billion thanks to generous union agreements. He approved the congestion tax. I mean, this is an outright indictment of New York, and Cuomo. I mean, and the liberals and the Democrat machine of how they just set this up. Their failures led to this, right? I mean, and that to me, that's just a microcosm of what we see. You talked earlier about the autopsy of after the 2012 election and all these kinds of things are going on there with the Republican Party, and the Democrats are trying to kind of figure out what went wrong, in 2024, right, with the general election, with the presidential election, but they keep seeing things like this, right? The stuff goes like this. It's like, this is not what we want, and
my problem with Mamdani is I agree with his idea of tackling the affordability crisis, but the problem is what he's proposing will only make it worse. It's not going to help. Rent control is a good example. Why are people going to build more apartments if they're going to be blocked with their profits? There's a disincentivizes building housing. To reduce the price, you need more housing. So all these things are going to hurt, not helping. And like I said, the grocery stores, taking over the grocery stores, well, you'd pay everybody there $30 an hour. So what's going to happen to prices? The free bus rides and all this stuff sounds nice, but someone will have to pay for it, which means higher taxes. And you may continue to drive more and more people out of the city, and you're going to drive the people out of the city who are paying the bills, who are paying the taxes. So you're going to drive them out, and everybody there is going to be there receiving benefits. Well, there's not going to be the money to pay the benefits. So he's a disaster. And I almost think he kind of knows it because he gave himself a little wiggle room. What he said was, if my plans don't work, I'll try something else. So he's kind of giving himself the wiggle room to know, I know this won't work, but I'm going to say it because it helps him get elected. It's almost like he was FDR in 32. I'm just trying different things. But you see, we know those things don't work. And this kid, maybe he's too young. He doesn't realize it. But I mean, we had David Dinkins as mayor. We had these people. You can see them. You can take a look at what they did. There's no surprise. You had Rudy Giuliani come and adopt different set of policies that worked. So I don't know. Maybe he won't win. But I also point out in my column that it's significant. The three largest cities in America, New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago, all now, if Mamdani wins, will have left-wing mayors. Left-wing, basically socialist mayors. So that, I think, tells you the state of the Democratic Party, and that tells you who's in charge. The left is in charge at this point. They're not looking for moderates.
No, go ahead. Continue. Go ahead. Finish.
Well, and that's why it brings me to why I think Schumer's in trouble, because it's going to be the same electorate, a lot of the same electorate, not totally, but it's New York electorate. And I think they're angry, but they're irrational about it. I think that the AOC types, they don't care about what happened in the last election. They don't care about economic reality or common sense. I think they're just so determined to stick with their agenda, their leftist agenda. I just don't see them changing. I think they're just going to double down on it and find candidates to the left of Kamala Harris. I think that's where they're headed. But I don't know. I think there may be moderate Democrats out there, but they're quiet, I think, for the most part, and I don't think they have much power. So
yeah, I mean, and look, we've already seen in the last 20 years, 15, 20 years, whatever it's been, maybe less than that, where the blue dog Democrats, they basically have been run out of existence. The people, the Democrats that had been elected to both the House and the Senate, that were these, they were kind of moderate. I mean, they had, they might have been liberal on social policy, but they'd be, pretty conservative on fiscal policy or defense or something like that. You had people you could count on, for certain things. The Democrats ran them out of the party, and those were, even if you didn't agree with them all the time, they were some pretty reasoned voices, and I think they had some respect. The Sam Nunns or the Scoop Jacksons. They had some things that they did that were good. That they were trying to uphold. And voted the right way sometimes. But we have a big, divide now. There's real polarization here. Yeah, and the left doesn't care. The left doesn't care about that at all. And so, yes, you're right. You're seeing this. If New York, elects a socialist, you go along with Karen Bass and and Brandon Johnson, and you have three big cities, the biggest cities in America, being run by these three, extra extreme leftists, and Karen Bass. I mean, Bass, she was on, she was out there talking about the riots, after the ice raids and all this stuff, and she had the gall to say, well, we have everything is calm because of me, right? And yet you have people out there going like, yeah, but my store was looted. And there's millions of dollars in damage. Even the comptroller in LA posted figures, in the tens of millions of dollars in costs, that the riots are the bill is going to be footed by LA. And that was not peaceful. The leftists don't want to be peaceful. That's not their thing. They make a lot of noise. They will kind of encourage people to take action and be destroy property or do whatever they need to do to get their point across. But yeah, I mean, insane ideas. So grocery stores. Does he have any idea of what it takes to run a grocery store? And the fact is that the average grocery store's margin is about 2 to 3%. You can't, they don't make a lot of money overall. I mean, they have to deal with a lot of different things. It's like, they buy all that produce and they don't sell every last bit of it. So they actually have to either get rid of it or donate it. So you got to charge to try to, they have to charge whatever they can to make sure that they make some kind of a profit to stay in business. But he would find that these, the government taking over stuff like that. Wrong answer. The wrong answer.
They have trouble. Yeah, they have trouble doing anything. And then, of course, the $30 minimum wage is just going to cost a lot of jobs. But I think it's one of those things that wealthy New Yorkers can vote for all that because they'll be fine. They'll survive. But if you're working and scraping, getting by, you're not going to be fine with these policies. Well, it's really the wealthy that can afford socialism. Well, they think they can.
My argument for when they were doing the whole Fight for 15 thing and all this kind of stuff was that, okay, fine, you raise that then, and a lot of conservatives say, well, if you're going to go to 15, you might as well go to 50. I mean, what the heck's the difference at this point, right? Because all you're going to do is drive up the cost of the services or products that are out there as a result of increasing the minimum wage. And the minimum, you're not in a McDonald's for your career. I mean, not as someone who's slinging burgers, making fries, making shakes, working the counter. Those were never ever career jobs. Those are like training jobs. Those are my son. One of my kids worked in a Taco Bell. Okay. And that's the kind of target they have, is that they know that they're going to get high turnover. They'll get these teenagers for a year or two of that, and they'll bring in more teenagers, and they'll just keep doing that. But for the fact that these kids are unskilled labor and they're not going to be around a lot, you pay them $7, $8, $9 an hour, whatever the minimum wage is, was at the time, and everybody, and they make money. The kid is happy because he's making some money. He's living at home, so he doesn't have a lot of overhead. But we've seen what happens. You go to McDonald's, right?
Oh, all the time. I got the belly to prove it.
Yeah, the
And the cholesterol.
the cost of the food there is much higher than it was a few years ago. And
Yeah.
part of that reason is that because labor is so high. I mean, I was at a Habit Burger yesterday, and I just saw in the window that they're paying anywhere from $17 to $18, looking for people to work for $17 an hour. That's easily more than double that they were paying a few years ago. Well, what does that do to the price of a burger, fry, shakes, or whatever? It has to go up. I read the article in the Wall Street Journal the other day about LA has got these, they're moving towards that, like that $30 minimum wage in LA for like hotel workers and stuff like that. There are people who they're investors and other companies who own and operate hotels in LA, and they're like, I would sell my hotel today if I could find a buyer, because I can't make money now with this minimum wage. I can't find enough workers to work to begin with, but I can't afford. This article blew me away because it said that the average cost of a hotel room in terms of the cost from the owner's standpoint of a hotel room in LA, when you factor in labor, is $250 a night.
Wow.
Okay. What does that mean? That means you're going to have to pay at least $250 a night, which means you really are going to be paying like $300, $350, right, or something like that, for them to make a reasonable profit so that they can keep operating. It's like, the days that you and I could go to LA and maybe find a nice hotel at $100 a night, kiss that goodbye. It doesn't and can't exist in this environment. But who gets hurt about this is that if Walmart has to raise their prices, even the people that are getting paid $15 an hour are going to find out that the milk and the bread and the eggs at Walmart has gone up. And why is that? Because everybody's getting paid more. So it's a vicious cycle, and it's one that doesn't make a lot of sense in that regard. Is that you think you're making more money, and then you go to the store and like, oh, but now I got to pay 20% more for eggs. I never thought about that, right? Yeah. So these things happen, and all that. All right, we've got a few more. Well, geez, no, well, we've hit a couple. We've done well, but we're just about out of time. So, David, because I was talking so much, I didn't do.
Oh no, it's fine. I'll stop if there's more time.
No, go ahead. Go.
Check my Substack. It's listed down below, davidshepard.substack.com. I got my own podcast coming on, and I'm hoping, Don, you'll come on soon as a guest. I was in Madison County Tuesday, speaking to the Madison County Republican Women's Club here in Virginia. Great group, and I enjoyed speaking to them. Great bunch of ladies, and they're doing good hard work. But otherwise, doing good and looking for the weekend, and hopefully it'll be a little cooler. So let's hope for that.
Yeah, and we'll have next week. Let's see.
4th of July. When is 4th of July? Is that next week?
I think it's actually next week. Isn't it next Friday?
Oh my God. Time is flying.
Yeah. So happy 4th of July, everybody. Because I'm not really sure what Dwight's plan is. Are we going to do a show or not? I don't know.
I don't know.
It doesn't matter. It won't matter to me one way or the other for that night. But yeah, look, that's great. We appreciate all that you do, and I'm glad that you're getting around there and being able to talk about your issues and your books, and you're really starting to pump things out on Substack. I'm trying to keep up with it. I've been a little busy lately.
Yeah, I wish I could crank it out like some people. I mean, I have a goal of 3 times a week, but even 2 times is becoming 2 times in the podcast. So I got to crank it out a little bit more, but it's going.
Things get in the way. I mean, in this, I will confess to being, there's some inertia within me, but there's also the fact that there's other stuff happens in my life, and so I have my goal for the Accuracy in Academia website would be like 3 posts a week, and I'm lucky if I get 1 up there because stuff happens. I'm doing the podcast, so I got that in addition if nothing else happens. But but I haven't been able to get as much going, as a result of that. So you find that things can be kind of hard to meet those goals, but it's good to have those goals because it's like, I want to shoot for doing, X, Y, Z, whatever. And that the content is having current constant content for your Substack. That's always a plus. And, doing all those things.
And the last thing, it's a non-political thing, but I'm speaking Sunday. They're letting me. I'm being the worship leader. I have to read the prayers Sunday at the church. So I'm a guy that usually stumbles in late. So, but they let me do the prayers. So I'm looking forward to that. Just it's an old church. I just feel certain the history of that, of standing up there and doing the prayers.
Oh, that's great. That's great. That's funny. That's funny because alternatively, my wife has been assigned to give a talk at church on Sunday. Okay. So the way our church works is that there's no one person that gives a sermon. There's no like pastor or whatever. Okay. The bishop and his counselors, they choose. They invite people to speak. They send them an email or a text and say, "Can you speak on this Sunday about this topic?" Give them some guidelines. So my wife hasn't spoken for a couple of years, so her number was probably coming up. She's a little concerned because, Spencer, has passed on. Spencer was her editor, and she told me, she says, "You have to look at this talk tomorrow, and you cannot just say it's okay," because that is my tendency. Is that it's her voice. I don't want to make it my voice. I want it to be her voice and her feelings. So now I'm going to have to look for it and kind of fill in for Spencer a little bit and try to give her some constructive criticism. But I think she's going to be fine. It's 5 or 6 minutes.
That's not. Yeah, so.
And to be honest, we go through this. We listen to talks roughly 50 times a year or whatever.
Yeah.
Or maybe a little bit less than that. I guess with the schedule that we have, so maybe it's close to 35 or 36. You could interview people in my church, and I bet you dollars to donuts that they probably will not be able to remember what she said 2 years ago, much less who spoke the previous week and what they said. Right?
Yeah.
It's something that you do in the moment, but people are so busy. They take it in at that point in time, and there's probably a very small percentage of people that absorb it enough that it actually, that they're going to remember it a week from now or whatever. But it's nice to participate nevertheless. So good for you.
Thank you.
All right. So we're just a tad over. I just want to say a couple of quick things. There's going to be a vote, I guess, on the big beautiful bill tomorrow. I'm not sure.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, that's what they're saying. I'm not sure how that's going to go.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that was the last news report I saw tonight. Trump has ended his talks with Canada.
I heard that, yes.
Yeah, he said he's going to impose tariffs. And he says that it's over the digital services tax, which targets a lot of mostly American companies. The EU has done this. I hate this stuff. I really hate the EU and all those. They find more ways of taxing these companies. They say, they're like, oh, look, Meta, Google, Amazon, they're raking it in. So we're going to create a whole tax structure so we can collect more money from them. That's all it is. It's just a big scheme on their part. So I don't like that. And then Gavin Newsom is suing Fox News for defamation using the same $787 million figure that Fox settled with that other company. So that's not going to go anywhere. I mean, I don't think he's got a chance. But this is Gavin Newsom being Gavin Newsom. So I don't know. All right. Anyway, thanks everyone for joining us tonight. Hope you enjoyed it. Just to answer the question we had earlier. Hold on here. Things kind of pop up in here. From Susan is who Amber is like, I will say, based on the comments that wound up in my comment section, I'll say Amber's a troll.
Mhm.
Oh, and here okay, so let's say, yeah, just for it on this one, Gavin, just as I mentioned, I don't think Newsom has a chance. I think Fox wins this. This case will get thrown out.
Yeah.
This is not like Donald Trump suing the cable networks and actually getting settlements, which has been remarkable.
Yeah.
So it's a whole different ballgame. All right. Once again, thanks a lot for everybody. Hope you enjoyed it. I do not know if we'll have a show next week. We'll have to consult with the master, Dwight, and see what happens. But if we don't, have a happy 4th of July. Have a great week. Lots of news probably still to come. But where Trump is on a roll. So we'll see what happens. So we'll see you again either next week or the week after. I don't know.
All right, see you, Don.
All right. See you, David. Bye-bye.
See you, Susan.